There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the youngest son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him."
I want to give you a warm welcome to today. Thank you for joining us. And if this is the first time that you're listening, this is part 3 and on the prodigal son, the parable of the prodigal son. So you can go back and see the other editions as well, see what was said in those. We spoke about the son number 1, who was the self-absorbed son. We spoke about son number 2, who was a resentful son. And today we intend to speak about the father that was in pain. Just to tell you who we are and who I am, my name is Jeff Bond, and we are a church in Constantia in Cape Town. Our denomination is the Assemblies of God. You'll find us warm, welcoming. If you're in the area, we'll be delighted if you will come and join us sometime. So enjoy the service with us, enjoy what I have to say, and communicate as well. I'd appreciate that so much. The story that is found in Luke chapter 15, the story of the prodigal son, it's a chapter with 3 parables that are set in, and they are triggered by criticism that Jesus is friendly with sinful type people. And this isn't a theology type story. That's the story of the prodigal son. It's not a philosophical story. It's not about concepts and abstractions. It's about feelings. It's about emotions. It's about relationships. It's about home. It's about you, and it's about me. And so listen to what I have to say as we talk about the story of the prodigal. So the young boy says, "Give me my inheritance before you die. I don't want to wait for you to die. Give it to me now." He takes his inheritance. He goes to a far land. He blows it. When he is completely destitute, he decides in desperation to return to his father, not knowing what sort of a welcome he would receive from his father. But his father gives him the most wonderful welcome, throws his arms around him, hugs him, and they have a party. There's a second son. That second son is the son who never leaves home. He obeys all the rules. He is a compliant son. And when he sees that a party has been thrown for the son that's run away, he is extremely resentful, very, very angry. And the father says to him, "Please come in and join the party." But the boy, the older son, refuses to come and join. And so today I'm speaking about the heartache of the father. When we do these films on YouTube, I'm always so pleased when people write back and make contact. Someone made contact with me and asked an excellent question. They said, where is the mother in this story? It's a very good question, actually. Where is the mother? And we can agree that even if the mother is not mentioned in the story is full of nurturing. There are clothes spoken about. There are shoes spoken about. There's jewelry spoken about. There's catering that is spoken about. There's compassion. There's hugging. There's kissing. Those are all nurturing, maternal things that are being spoken about. There's a book that was published in 2020 entitled Jesus and John Wayne. It's a book that's caused quite a stir, and it addresses the issue of toxic masculinity in the church. This story does not have any sign of toxic masculinity. The father is maternal, the father is maternal, and the father is nurturing. And so too the church should be maternal, and the church should be nurturing. We do not want to have a macho style church that doesn't fit in with Jesus and the stories that we read in the Gospels. My own experience with my father was that he had a nurturing dimension. He had a reputation for toughness in his dealings, and he probably earned it. He was in his teen years, and I witnessed it myself, how he was a talented boxer. I watched him box. As I was writing this, my memory went back. When I was about 11 years old, I started to stutter. And I was sitting in the back seat of the car. It was a VW Beetle, and so I was sitting in the back seat. And I started to say something with a stutter. And my father slammed on brakes. And he said to me, if you ever stutter again, I will give you such a thrashing. I just about died of fright. And for quite a while, I made sure that I weighed what I was going to say very carefully before I opened my mouth. But I don't know whether it was the right way that he did it or the wrong way that he did it. It was just the way that he did it. But I never stuttered again. And corporal punishment, he was a firm believer in corporal punishment. I'm not. But he was rough and ready in his style. He really was. I remember falling off a bicycle and having a gravel-embedded knee, and him putting me on the edge of the bath with my feet inside the bath and taking the nail brush and the hand shower and scrubbing it. And before I knew what he was going to do, he had got every last little bit of debris out of that knee. And I was yelling, but it was over, and the pain was gone. So he was rough and ready in that style. Having said that, he certainly was not macho. I heard him often, right to the end of his life, reading poetry in his room with a loud voice and with tears, crying as he read poetry. He cried very, very easily. He was the one. He used to cuddle us. We used to walk, and when we walked in town when we were kids, my sister and I, we'd always hold his hand, and he would walk very fast, and we would have to go at a smart trot to keep up with him. But it was his hand that we held, and in the mornings it was a treat for us on the Saturday morning to sneak into bed with him and cuddle with him. And sometimes we'd even manage to sneak the new puppy into bed with us. My mother would never have allowed it, but we managed to, by subterfuge, get the puppy into the bed. When I had nightmares, he would come and he would deal with the situation and comfort me and deal with my irrational fears. So he was a nurturing person, even though he was a tough person. God is described as our Father who is in heaven. And so people might have an idea of God because of their concept of Father. But God also has maternal descriptions as well. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you as a hen gathers her chicks. That's a maternal, a nurturing, protecting instinct that's been given expression to. Isaiah 49, just listen to this. Let me just read this to you. To me, this is just so special. Listen. Shout for joy, O heavens. Rejoice, O earth. Burst into song, O mountains. For the Lord comforts his people. He's the God of comfort. And he will have compassion on his afflicted ones. But Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me. The Lord has forgotten me. His reply to that is, can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. So he uses the imagery of a nursing mother. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me. Your sons hasten back, and those who laid you waste depart from you. And he goes on in those terms to speak in nurturing and maternal terms to the nation that he loves. When you come to God's presence, you should jettison macho images, and you should jettison performance images. Jettison those. They don't fit. God is a nurturing, caring God. We see that in the prodigal son parable. Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 17, we used to sing it. The Lord your God in the midst of thee is mighty, mighty. He will save and rejoice over thee with joy, with joy. He will rest in his love. He will sing over you. He will sing over you. God sings over us. Just a picture of a lullaby. God doing a lullaby. Here's another thought when it comes to the prodigal son's father and how he behaved. He was not macho. It wasn't, hey, high five, how you doing, boy? It was hugs and kisses and a party that was provided. A lesson for us all when our children walk out of our homes. We should remember this. The prodigal knew how to find his father because he knew where his father lived. He knew his father's value system. My father's hired men have food enough and to spare. He knew that he was generous. He knew his father's habits. He would go every single day and look down the road that the sun had gone down when he'd left. The importance of values and habits and consistency. Parents, with your children, be consistent. Have habits, have values, stick to them. Even if your children wander at some stage, they must know where you are. If they don't know where you are, and they don't know where you're going to be standing, they've got a problem. They've got to be able to navigate by us as the parents. And so the importance of values and habits and consistency, the importance of church attendance, the importance of Christian values, the importance of respect, those are things that they get from steadfast parents. Those are things that you can do for your own children. So I urge you to establish and to follow Christian habits and lifestyles. Be consistent and be predictable. That's what this father was. He was consistent. The father hadn't moved house. May your children know where you live. Then they'll be able to get back to your house. You can't persuade them. You can't hunt them down and drag them, but you can stay steady and you can watch over the garden gate, and one day you will see them walking back home. A word of encouragement for you. The suffering father. Revelation chapter 5 is a great chapter, shows the things that are in heaven. It's full of imagery, and it's apocrypha. It's a type of literature. But there's that scene in heaven with mighty angels and thousands of them and living creatures and elders. And at its center point in Revelation chapter 5, of all the glory, majesty, and mystery of heaven, there is a slaughtered lamb. At the core of heaven is suffering. At the core of heaven is pain. Jesus was raised from the dead. We sing about it. His body began to breathe, and we cheer when they sing it. Yet when he appeared to Thomas, he said to Thomas, "Put your finger in my hands. Put your hand into my side." Jesus is a wounded Savior. And I want to speak about the pain, the suffering of the Father. And there's suffering in this story. The Father suffered rejection by his Son. The Father suffered humiliation by his Son. The Father suffered the pangs of longing for his Son as he looked down that road each day. Have you experienced the pangs of longing for someone who's left you and you long for them to return? The Father suffered the searing accusation from the other son. "You never even gave me a goat to celebrate with my friends. You are an unfair Father," the older son said. John chapter 3 verse 16 says this, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." It doesn't actually mean that God loved the world to this extent, or that he loved the world this amount. It means, for God so loved the world, God loved the world in this way, in this manner, that he gave his Son. That's how God loved the world. Not loved the world so much, he loved the world in this way. He gave his only begotten Son. Do you know that loving brings suffering? Always. You cannot love and avoid suffering. You cannot, and some people say, "I don't want to suffer, so I refuse to love." That is so. Woven into the story of grace and restoration is a sub-theme of suffering and the pain that the Father experienced. And this serves to inform our own view of our own behaviors. You see, when I behave, I have an impact on others. When we behave, we impact ourselves. I've sinned against heaven, and I've sinned in your sight, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. I've damaged myself, I've damaged you, and I've damaged heaven, the Son said. But when we thoughtlessly misbehave, we impact the family and we impact the Father. We cannot say, "'Tis naught, it's nothing, I can be forgiven, everyone does it." We can't say that. Hebrews chapter 6, bearing in mind the context of Hebrews, was there were people that wanted to leave the Christian faith and repudiate their faith in Jesus, and repudiate Jesus as Messiah in order to be allowed back into the synagogue and in order to be allowed back into the Jewish community. And it says this in chapter 6, "To their loss, they are crucifying the Son of God all over again and subjecting him to public disgrace." And so when we sin, we don't only affect ourselves, "I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." We sin against heaven. We sin against our Father. And so Having stated that qualifier, the underlying point, the qualifier being that this was people who wanted to apostatize, the underlying point still remains. The Father felt pain, and we inflict pain, and we cannot afford to live carelessly. May we have in our own hearts a sense that when we are careless with our lives, we don't only damage ourselves, we damage those that we love, and we damage God himself. The Father experienced pain. Our prayer should not be only for restoration, it should also be for steadfastness in our Christian life. Another question: did the father show favoritism? The oldest son accused the father of favoritism. You pulled out the stops with this huge party for this son of yours that went and has spent all your money on whores, but you never even gave me a goat so that I could celebrate with my own friends. It's there in the story. The father doesn't take the oldest son for granted. He is equally distressed at the absence and equally joyful at the presence of both sons at his table. He watches for the younger and he pleads with the elder. The older son compares himself with the younger son and thinks that the younger son is receiving unfair and undeserved attention and favor. But this is not so. The father loves both sons equally and longs for them both to be a part of his joy. We can think in our lives that when one is blessed, the other is unblessed. When one is cared for, the other is not being cared for. That it goes like that. This is not so. Grace for you doesn't mean less for me, but my fallen, insecure nature makes me feel like that. And so we don't want to be that oldest son. Matthew chapter 20, Jesus told a story that does not sit well with us. What he said in Matthew chapter 20, the parable of the worker in the vineyard. He tells a story about a man who went out at 8 o'clock in the morning, saw some people standing on the side of the road. He said, come and work in my vineyard, and I'll give you, let's say, 500 rand for the day. They come happily. That's fair. 500 rand. At 9 o'clock, he employs some more. At 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And the story goes all the way to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He goes and he sees some people sitting on the side of the road. He says, why aren't you working? They say, no one's employed us. He says, come and work for me. But he doesn't say how much you'll pay them. At 5 o'clock, when it's home time, the owner of the vineyard says, first of all, to the people that started at 4 o'clock, come, I'm going to pay you. He gives them 500 rand. And then all the way back to the people who started at 8 in the morning, he also gives them 500 rand. And the people that started at 8 in the morning are very unhappy. They say, this is unfair. He says, why is it unfair? I agreed to 500 rand and I gave you 500 rand. They had their expectations raised. Philip Yancey coined the phrase ungrace. And we live in a universe of ungrace, a universe of earning, a transactional relationship with God. If I work so much, God must give me so much. But God is a God of grace. He gives us more than what we deserve. He doesn't give us what we deserve. When I see somebody else getting something that they don't deserve, I get unhappy, as though somehow something has been stolen from me. We say that that is unfair. But the last thing I want in my life is to live in a fair world. I don't want to live in a fair world. I can't afford to live in a fair world. I have to depend upon the unmerited grace of God. I don't want justice. I need mercy in my life. And part of the world's way of thinking, and part of its competitive lifestyle is that we expect to be rewarded for all the good things that we do. That was the older son. And he made this accusation against the father. You are unfair because you treated the younger son in such a way. But he wasn't being unfair to the older son. He had grace for the older son as well, if the older son could only have seen it. So the older brother is living in the economy of the law. I've earned. But this father's economy is the economy of grace. I'm loved, and that means that I can expect something wonderful from God. And so the call to us is to wonder, not W-A-N, W-O-N-D-E-R, wonder at the wonderful grace of God. I don't want to look with my human comparing eyes, but I want to look with the eyes of a loving Father. The story of the prodigal son takes me into a completely different space. It takes me into the space of grace, into the space of mercy, into the space of God's love. For God loved the world in this way. And the appropriate response to this story is that we have to wonder at the nature of the Father. This Father is a truly wonderful Father. I love you, Lord, for your mercies never fail. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. And so the story starts. He mixes with the wrong people. And the explanation in the story is, I mix with those people because that's the way that I am. So, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever your circumstances are, I'm saying to you today that God is an extraordinary God. He's a God of grace. You cannot earn salvation. And so I come to the conclusion of the story of the prodigal son, talking to you, whoever you may be, wherever you may be, whatever you may do for a living, wherever you may be found, wherever you are listening to this story. I come to you to say that the story of the prodigal son is the story about a wonderful Father. Why don't you trust him? Even if you've wandered far away and you've earned anger, you should receive anger. God has grace for you. If you're working out in the field, working under the whip of the law and duty, the Father wants you to come and enjoy the banquet. God is a wonderful God. I love you, God. Your mercies never come to an end. God bless you. We're coming to the Christmas season. It's a wonderful season. It's a season where people meet up. It's a season where families join together. It's a time of celebration, and it's a time of brightness. It's a time of joy. Our theme for this year is the night the skies joined in, seeing the wonder in the darkness. And so we want you to join in with us over Christmas. We've got special things planned, and we want you to join with us and help us to make this a special month for many, many people. As we take the tithes and the offerings right now, think about the season, think about what we're trying to achieve, think about people who are living in darkness, think about such people, and may this church be a witness and a joy to many around. Help us and work together with us. God bless you as we take up the offering.